Salutations, everybody. Welcome back to another Stellaris guide. I'm Lord Forrend, and today we're going to talk about building and designing an empire and race. So, one of the coolest things about Stellaris is all the customization options you get for designing your empire. We'll cover how to design a decent one and why you should potentially pick certain traits for your species in your empire over others. It's not going to be a completely in-depth thing giving you optimized builds because half the fun of Stellaris is a bit of the role-playing, plus I'm not a min-maxer. And this video should be divided into various chapters, so you should be able to click on them below and jump to what you want to see. And if this helps you in any way, shape, or form, do leave a like, a comment, or subscribe. And let's just jump right into it. Being aware, of course, that I have all the DLCs here, so this may have different options than you do as well. I'm not going to go into trying to figure out which DLCs apply which traits for you. This is for all of them. You should be able to create something pretty similar. So first off, when you load in, there's only a couple things that really matter for designing a good empire and race. That is your traits, your name and class for your world, your origin, and your ethics. Everything else is pretty much just cosmetic. You could literally just play with the defaults all the time, and outside of your people looking like humans all the time, you wouldn't notice the difference. So, where to start? Most people would start up top with the appearance, the species name, and stuff. I recommend you actually start down on the government ethics or even on your origin. The reason being, these will affect the species traits and stuff you will have. This is where knowing type empire you want to build comes in. If you're looking for a specific role-playing system, like playing, I don't know, space communists, or slaving despots, or religious crusaders, etc., etc., this is where you start to select that stuff. But let's start with origin. So, there's a whole variety of origins you can pick, and they will drastically affect both your government and your traits and stuff. But they'll also affect your gameplay, obviously. So let's start from the top, and we'll go down them as best we can. So at the start, we got Prosperous Unification. This is the default starting option. It's actually a pretty decent option because you get more pops and additional districts, which are actually pretty powerful early game. The 4 pops give you a boost to everything, basically. You'll be able to build more buildings early on. You'll start by gaining more resources. It's a very nice start. You're never bad or off picking the start. This is the default one. Starts are better or worse compared to this, and this is kind of what I'll be comparing them to. Some of the good starts, you still have to play very well to get a better start than this. The next one, Mechanist. This is for if you want to start with robots and focus into modding your species. Now, the requirement here is you have to have some materialist. So if you were to pick this, you would have to go to government and ethics and make sure that you have at least level 1 of materialists. It's kind of, you might have to jump between those two screens a lot depending on the type of origin and empire you want. This is a very good one, especially if you're going to go into robots, even making your species robots or even cyborgs later. This is a solid start. The robots will be very productive. You're going to mainly use them to do basic labor jobs, which they do very well. Plus, you start with the ability to mod and assemble them as well, which is quite nice. The next one, Syncretic Evolution. This is for people who are slavers, basically. The reason is you get 12 pops of another subservient species. They actually, you'll notice as soon as I select this, the left side changed. This gives you another species to set up. They start with a trait called Serviles, where they have a boost to happiness, resources, generation, but they can't do leaders, rulers, or specialists. Basically, they can only be slaves or low-level workers. If you're going authoritarian slaving, this is a very good origin for you. For everyone else, it's not particularly great. It's not terrible, even if you're not making them slaves, because they will just do those jobs and be more productive. But it's really kind of for slavers, to be honest. The next one here, Life Seeded. You get a special massive homeworld, but it is a Gaia world, meaning that you have trouble living on other planets. If you want to do a one planet start or empire, this is probably one of the better ones to do. The downside is you're pretty much going to have to find another empire in the galaxy and get a migration pact with them, migrate some of their pops to your planet, and then colonize with those to be able to expand to another world. Or else you have to wait considerably to the mid or late game when you can gene mod your species into being habitable on other worlds. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at a pathetically low level of habitability to the point it's not worth colonizing. The next one, Post-Apocalyptic. Your capital is a tomb world. You have the ability to settle tomb worlds, and your leaders live a little bit longer. It's not a bad start. The lifespan is kind of nice. The tomb world habitability is cool. There's a half-decent amount of tomb worlds in the galaxy. You can make more. But the reality is, it just gives you kind of a unique planet type no one else wants. You still have to capture them in your borders. So it doesn't help too much there. It's kind of fun, though. You'll notice that it gives requirements below, so be aware that you can't pick these if you take this. This applies to all of them. The next one, Remnants. This is an interesting one. You get a relic world. The relic world has... Oh, I'm not going to spoil everything for you, but it does give you some unique starts, boosts to getting tech and stuff earlier. It's a decent start. It's not the world's largest planet, but it does allow you to, of course, colonize other places, which Life Seeded, for example, which is larger, would not. It's a fun start. You can kind of role play, oh, my empire collapsed, I'm rebuilding. Next one we got is a Shattered Ring. So Shattered Rings are quite powerful. They're a late game mega structure where you basically destroy all the planets and stuff in a system and make a world that people can live on in a ring. It is strong in the sense that you gain access to a late game mega structure at the beginning. However, it's not fully productive, and you'll have to slowly build and repair your way around the ring in order to get full usage from it. The downside is, similar to Life Seeded, your habitability preference is ring world preference, making other types of settlement not particularly great. You'll have to get another species to colonize them at any decent pace with any great habitability. On the other hand, you can have a very large, very powerful one system empire from this. There is some struggle with the start because you can't fully gain all resources effectively, and your starting system doesn't have any resources really because it's all been used in making ring worlds. The next one, Void Dwellers. This, you start with habitats. Habitats are, I could say, mid-game megastructure. They're basically artificial planets that have limitations on what they can build for districts in them, depending on which planets and other stars and stuff you put them on. You start with 3 habitats, and you can build more, which is nice. Your species likes habitats, so you produce more. The downside is they have penalties if they live on normal planets. They do get more food from farmer jobs on habitats, and they have no politicians. Instead, they have colonists. Basically, you don't ever really settle planets. You're still going to want to settle some planets, but usually with a secondary species. Or if you need special, unique resources like crystals, mineral motes, or gases. But by and large, you live on habitats. This used to be an amazingly powerful start. I believe they've nerfed it a little bit. It's still quite fun, but it is definitely an advanced start, so don't do this if you're still learning the game. But it does have a very different feel. The next one here, you're a scion of a fallen empire. This is kind of interesting because the fallen empires are very powerful. Being a subject of them, they will periodically give you ships, technology, or resources. Plus, they will defend you against anybody attacking you, which sometimes can allow you to gain territory. The downside is you're severely limited in what you can do. Last time I played them, I had trouble starting wars and stuff because of the Fallen Empire. That's just the way it goes. The downside is you're kind of stuck under them until mid to late game, but you're protected till mid to late game. So, the downside is you can't do some of the like xenophobe, agrarian, isolationist stuff with this, just because it prevents fanatic xenophobe. The next one, Galactic Doorstep. You start with the dormant gateway in your home system. This is arguably one of the worst ones, just because a gateway is cool, but it's not game changing. Next one, Tree of Life. This requires Hive Minds, but it's kind of cool. You get this Tree of Life that has to be present on your planet, or you receive penalties. If you build a Tree of Life on your planet, you get some bonuses. It's quite cool. The downside is don't lose your capital, or you'll basically be dead. You have to defend your capital's world to the death. But it's a fun one to play with. On the Shoulders of Giants, this will speed up your tech and progress towards some unique event chains. So not to spoil anything, but it's a fun one to play through. It's a bit of a tech boost. It's very similar to Prosperous Unification without the pops, because really you get a default start, slightly worse, but you get these unique archaeological sites. The next one, Calamitous Birth. You have to play as a lithoid, which is kind of like a rock population, rock people. If you've seen the Thor movie, there's the character in there who's a rock, would be an example here. Basically, you start off with a massive crater, and you can build meteorite colony ships, which move quickly. It says they damage their target planets. They do, but what they do is they reshape it a bit towards being better habitat, better colonized by lithoid pops, more minerals and stuff. Considering these people eat minerals, they need more minerals. This helps with that. You also get experimental crater. This is a decent start for lithoid pops. I'll go over which ones I think are good at the end. Right now, let's just go through all of them. The next one, Resource Consolidation, solely for machines, gives you access to Machine World, which is a late game project. It can be very powerful, especially for robots. You can't be a rogue servitor if you're doing this, because that would be way too powerful, and it would kill off the people they're serving. Now we get into some of the more interesting ones. So we have Common Ground. You start as the leader of a non-hegemony federation. You get to pick what federation you're in, and with the number of federations, you can have some fun with this. The downside is any guaranteed habitable worlds near your home system are occupied by your other two members. And you do start with the Federation tradition unlocked, meaning you're already going down the diplomacy tree. This can be fun. The downside is these members can either block your expansion, expand and become disloyal. They can leave. It can be powerful if you get something like a trade league going or other stuff. It basically guarantees you 2 allies for at least the early to mid part of the game, even if you yourself will be weaker because you will only start with 1 guaranteed system. The next one here is Hegemon. This is very similar to Common Ground. On the other hand, Hegemony is more of a militarized advantages for the leader, which is you. Is a little bit more militarized. I would almost take this over Common Ground unless I was going for something special like trade or research. Could be very powerful used properly. The downside is, of course, you are missing your 2 or so habitable worlds near your starting system. The next one is probably one of the hardest origins. I definitely do not recommend this unless you know what you're doing. Doomsday, your home will explode 30 to 45 years after the game starts. Up until it explodes, you'll be gaining special resources and bonuses. You won't have any guaranteed habitable worlds, meaning you have to explore fast and hope to relocate all or most of all your population to a new world before it explodes. You'll gain benefits. The downside is you might not find as good, or you might even be stuck on a substandard world for the beginning. It could be kind of fun for roleplay purposes. I would not pick this if you're trying to do anything competitive. It's not for that. The next one, Lost Colony. Basically, you're a separated colony from your higher advanced empire elsewhere in the galaxy. It's nothing really that special other than you'll find more of your species elsewhere in the galaxy. Necrophage is a very unique origin. Basically, you play as a parasite that takes over other species and transforms them into yours. You'll notice it immediately adds another species over here, which you can then, of course, customize. This drastically changes gameplay. It also changes your guaranteed habitable planets into primitive civilizations that you can, of course, then invade and convert into your population. The downside is necrophage pops have to be leaders or ruler jobs. Your pre-patient species is almost like slaves, but not exactly. It's quite interesting. It's a fun start. Can be very powerful used properly. The next one here, we have the Clone Army. So this is basically a leftover genetically engineered super soldiers. Think like the clones of Star Wars or multiple other sci-fi empires. You need them to be built. They have penalties. Overall, you can reform them and they become very powerful. You get several decisions later on what you want to do with clone vats. It's a very nice growth early on. The downside is you have an empire limit of 5, so you can really only get 5 worlds really producing population early on, but you do gain benefits to combat. Can be very powerful used properly, can be a little bit tricky early on. Here be dragons. You basically start with a space dragon in your homeworld. It will protect you, but you have to keep appeasing it, because if you offend it, problems will occur. Can be very powerful used properly. It's kind of a really unique thing. It does give you some guaranteed protection for a while. The next one here, Ocean Paradise. Basically, your homeworld's a giant. This is similar to Life Seeded. A giant ocean world. You gain bonuses towards happiness, pop growth, and output. However, your guaranteed planets are frozen worlds. Unlike Life Seeded, though, you still can settle ocean worlds if you find them elsewhere in the galaxy. You're not restricted to Gaia worlds. Similar, can be very powerful. The downside is it's hard to expand early on. The next one, and these are some of the newer ones, progenitor hives. You basically have a hive mind with one major mind and a bunch of minor minds, offsprings. They gain benefits they boost combat if they exist. You have to keep training offspring ships to improve your ships, offspring armies. However, the big thing is you can release sectors as subjects. So if you wanted to play as a hive mind with subject empires, this is how you would do so. Could be quite powerful used properly. However, if you don't have offspring ships, this is the penalties you're suffering from. And playing against players or AIs, they may target your offspring ships. If they happen to destroy them, all of a sudden your fleet is considerably weaker. So be aware you have to protect your offspring ships and rebuild them if they're destroyed. Quite fun though. The cool thing is they get XP passively, so you can have a strong core of leaders of your empire. The next one, Subterranean. Well, if you've ever wanted to live underground in planets around the galaxy, like dwarves, this is kind of it. You have Cave Dweller. You can build as many mining districts as you'd like, and building them gives housing and building slots. You gain all these benefits here and negatives. It costs more to build, more to upkeep, and slower to build. On the other hand, trying to bombard these planets into submission, it becomes an absolute nightmare. It takes forever. This is a very almost defensive start. Can become very powerful used properly. Be aware that you are going to have a slightly slower start than other empires. Next one, Slingshot to the Stars. This is kind of like if you want to just roll the dice every time you want to find new stuff. You start with a ruined quantum catapult, but you can repair and use it. Quantum catapults just throw your fleet to a random system in an area of that galaxy. Can be cool to explore. The downside is, of course, your empire is very fragmented and you can't guarantee travel between 2 points reliably, and you lose a habitable world. On the other hand, building starbases and remote systems costs less influence, so your empire can be very patchwork. Just pick the best systems to colonize. The downside, of course, is everyone else can cut you off from those systems outside of wars. The next one here, this is Teachers of the Shroud. This is if you want to go psionic, because it blocks all ascension paths except psionic ascension. So be aware that you do have to be spiritualist and you can't be machines. You gain latent psionics trait at the beginning. You have contact with the Shroudwalker Enclave. They can give you various missions, insights. They give you a teacher that, if you pay for it, is very powerful. And you can build a Shroud Beacon, which is almost like a wormhole between yours and the Shroudwalker Enclave. So you can, it's very hard for this start to be pinned into a corner. You can usually jump a good distance across the galaxy to expand as well. So you can have a split empire. Be aware, though, you have no other benefits outside of getting further down the psionic tree than anyone else does. The next one, Imperial Fiefdom. This is an interesting one. You start as a vassal of an advanced AI empire. You get to choose which specialist empire vassal you are at the start of the game, but you are a subject, so you do have to, at some point, if you want to rule the galaxy, rebel and take over. It's possible to replace the advanced AI empire as the leader and gain vassals yourself. The downside is, at the beginning, you're going to have to deal with various burdens and payments to your overlord. I honestly recommend, if you have to pick which ones you do, you pick something like, you don't want to lose tech research. So pick the other starting types that don't lose you tech research. Tech is the easiest way to get strong enough to rebel, basically. So pick which advanced specialist empire you want to play, and then revolt, take over, and probably make them your subject instead. Cool start, but you have to be pretty decent at rebelling and taking over to make full use of it. The next one, and this can be very, very powerful, Overtuned. This is basically like extreme gene modification. You can, if you pick this, you get access to a different group of traits that you can apply on your population. I don't think I can, here we are, I can show you some of them. These have bonuses like increased habitability, combat ability, farming. The downside is everyone you take makes your leaders live a shorter time. So it can be problematic because your rulers and your specialists, your leaders, will just keep dying. On the other hand, some of these bonuses are huge, like augmented intelligence can be stacked with like intelligent to gain extreme tech at the cost of your leaders dying more often. It can be very powerful if you do it. Something like excessive endurance. You can get some crazy amounts of habitability if you play it right. The downside is you also have to take negative traits. Very powerful. You can then later add them or remove them through gene tailoring, and you can balance stuff as well. Could be very powerful, not for beginners. And then we have Knights of the Toxic God. Basically, your empire was attacked by this weird, or your world was attacked by a weird poisonous entity hundreds of years ago. And now you've come up with this, it was a god, we need to go find it again. So you start with a unique habitat in the system that's basically the headquarters of your knights. Think almost like Crusaders of a galaxy. You start with a quest for the Toxic God. You'll gain various events and missions associated with it. You get access to some unique jobs. The Lord Commander and Knights can give some pretty nice tech and unity bonuses. The downside is you have to support them. You can further modify the Knights, Lord Commanders, and Squires as you progress through the quest. And eventually you'll find the Toxic God, assuming you'll live long enough and you can interact with it and stuff. Not to spoil it, it's a very fun path. It's slightly disappointing towards the end in my experience. And the downside is this habitat early on causes some economic troubles for your empire, in my experience. Not for beginners. Kind of disappointing at the end, but can be a fun role-playing one. So what I would say for good starts, obviously Prosperous Unification is what we'll be basing everything else on, so let's just go through them quickly. Mechanist, good if you're going robots. Syncretic, great if you're going slaving, bad for pretty much everyone else. Life-seeded, one planet challenge, very hard, probably not a great start for a lot of people. Post-apocalyptic, pretty cool if you want to roleplay, otherwise there's probably better starts. Remnants, great if you're wanting tech and other leads, probably a stronger start than you would suspect. Shadowed Ring, pretty powerful if you know how to play on a ring world and can play around the disadvantages, in which case it's a great start. Otherwise, if you don't know that, it's not a good start for you. Void Dwellers can be very powerful. It's a good start if you know how to run habitats. Don't do it if you don't know how to run habitats properly. Scion, I would actually rate this as slightly negative just because they do interact and interfere with your empire. On the other hand, if you're worried about being conquered, great defensive start. Weaker than the others, but more safe. Galactic Doorstep, my opinion, not a good start at all. You can build gateways relatively early on, so having this advantage isn't worth the weakness that you'd get, the less pops and districts you get from Prosperous Unification. Tree of Life, if you're playing a Hive Mind, probably a better start than just a default Hive Mind. Just be aware that you can't afford to lose your capital world. On the Shoulders of Giants, if you're going to play a tech civilization and you want a starting tech lead, great way to start. Calamitous Birth, if you're playing a Lithoid, and this is really good for you. Everyone else, obviously you can't take it. But unless you're going to double down into the ability to damage and reshape worlds, don't take this. Research Consolidation, if you're a Machine Empire and you're not a Rogue Servitor, honestly, you should probably take this. It's very powerful for your robots. Machine worlds are amazingly beneficial. This makes robots that much stronger. Common Ground, if you don't want to play as a Hegemon, but you do want to have allies early game, pick this. I would rate this slightly low, worse than average, just because you lose the guaranteed habitable worlds. Depending on the federation you pick and if you can play around it, it's great. Unfortunately, your other members, their ethics can be randomized, so sometimes they hate other members of your federation or people you want to ally as you expand, which can cause diplomatic pain. On the other hand, Hegemon, they don't have as much free will because they're basically under your control more, so it's, I think, a safer start than Common Ground. Slightly better than average, still not amazing. Doomsday, very negative unless you know how to play with it. The reality is, most new players, you're just going to die with this. Lost Colony, below average, not that great. You get no benefits and really no disadvantages, which is a problem because the default start gives you advantages. Necrophage, extraordinarily powerful, still one of the strongest origin starts if you know how to use it. Does require a different play style. These loss of these guaranteed habitable worlds is not as bad as you would think, but it does slow your early expansion, which is fine because you're super powerful. Clone Army, very strong early on. The increased combat ability is great. However, just be aware you're going to play a different empire. I'd say good start. Here Be Dragons, it's a defensive start. Later on, you can gain some benefits from it, but overall, I'd probably rate it slightly below average. Depends how you play, but there's honestly better starts. Ocean Paradise, this is just a general improvement in many ways upon Life Seeded. Yes, you don't have unique resources, but you can expand. I would rate this as a good start. It's got some very powerful synergies with governments and ethics. Progenitor Hive, this is almost solely a role-playing one. If you want subjects, great. Otherwise, don't take it. Subterranean, very powerful for defensive, good in multiplayer. Strong, above average, good start. Slingshot to the Stars, it's hit or miss. It can either be really good or it can be really bad. Overall, I wouldn't take it. I'd rate it below average just because of the randomness. Everything else is somewhat more guaranteed. Teachers of the Shroud, if you're going psionic, it's an advantage for you. If the other choice is the default unification start and you want to go psionic, take this. You won't regret it. It's good. However, don't take it if you don't want to be psionic, really. Imperial Fiefdom, if you want subjects and you want to revolt and feel like the underdog, go for it. Otherwise, slightly below average, just because of being a subject can be difficult to play around. Overtuned, it's a great start if you know how to play with gene modding and you want to deal with the downsides of the overtuned. Great if you're an advanced player, not so great if you're a still learning the game. Knights of the Toxic God, I've played through this, both options towards the end. Overall, I'd rate this below average. Even though it's got some benefits, the downsides currently outweigh the upsides, in my opinion. It's definitely more of a role-playing empire than anything else. And that is it for the various origins. So, on to government and ethics. So, there's a lot of decisions to be made on this page, more than you would expect. So one of the first things to think about is, are we going to be Machine Empire or a Hive Mind? If we are, we have to pick this from the start. It drastically changes the stuff we can pick here. So let's start with those and then we'll hit everybody else. So if you're going to play a Gestalt Consciousness, and we'll say you're going Machine, these are the various civics you can pick. There's a ton of them. The ones that will drastically affect your playstyle are Determined Exterminator. Basically, you're out to purge all organic life from the galaxy. Interestingly enough, you can still interact and have diplomacy with other robots if you find them in your in the world. It's very powerful. It's the second strongest of the extermination xenophobe starts. Very fun. The next one, Driven Assimilators. This is if you want to play role plays like the Borg from Star Trek. You want to invade other species and turn them into cyborgs in your empires. This one I would not think is a particularly good civic for a lot of people, mainly because you gain no bonuses to combat and stuff outside of being cyborgs, but everybody hates you slightly because they get a decreased opinion. In my opinion, it should have a little bit of a combat bonus. It's a very difficult empire to play if you don't know how to handle it. And then the last one that's a drastic change is these rogue servitors. Basically, you had let's say humans. You had a race of humans develop robots, and over time the robots started to do everything, and the humans lived in luxury, and eventually the machines ended up running the empire, but your sole goal is to keep your human or other species happy. The cool thing about this is you have massive unity gain. You gain unity, you gain happiness. The downside is you have to manage organics, which means as a machine empire, you actually have to deal with food. You have to deal with a separate pop in your empire that needs specific buildings built for living space, and you have to manage moving them between the worlds and finding worlds they can live on. Don't, there can be problems. It's quite a fun role-playing one, and the unity gain is really good for machines. The downside is you have another resource of food to manage that you and consumer goods, which you don't normally have to fully manage as machines. So those are the ones that will drastically affect your play style if you pick them. They change a lot of stuff about the game, but let's look at a default robot and what civics are good. So this first one, construction, you have more building slots, it's cheaper to build and construct them. Since you get this at the start of the game, it's actually quite decent. Rather than having to pick something like the prosperity tree to get these bonuses, this will allow you to have a slightly better start. Overall, it's a decent one to take. Delegated functions, basically your leaders are cheaper to upkeep, you gain additional envoy, and you have additional leader to pick from. I wouldn't rate this particularly high. The biggest reason to take this is cheaper maintenance of leaders. They're not usually the most expensive things. The envoy, on the other hand, is really good. Elevational hypothesis. This is if you almost want to play like spiritualist machines, ascending your planets, which is something you can do mid to late game, is stronger, they're cheaper, and you gain traditions faster. Overall, it's a decent one. I just think there are better ones to take. Factory overclocking, leader, higher level, and they gain them. This is a great one. Machine leaders, including your ruler, live forever, barring them going crazy. This allows you to level them up faster to gain those bonuses for longer of the game, and you can level them up higher. It's a good one to pick on most robot races. Hyper lubrication. Basically, you can build production basins where you gain assembly speed per industrial district, but you also have to pay more in amenities per industrial district. This can be very powerful. Machines' biggest weakness is slow pop assembly speed. The downside here is the amenities. You're going to have to build a separate building or two to handle it. Overall, if you're willing to play around it, it's a great Civic. Otherwise, I wouldn't take it unless you're willing to deal with those additional amenities. Next one, introspective. This is always a solid one. Additional research speed is amazing, especially on machines. The encryption is nice as well. This is definitely a top one. Maintenance protocols. Maintenance drones produce one Unity. This is not great. You're going to have some maintenance drones anyway, but the Unity gain is not game-changing. Specifically, if you're going the rogue servitors, this is almost entirely useless to you. Memorialists, you can build sanctuaries of repose on tomb worlds and relic worlds. They give drone jobs and decrease deviancy. They give you some benefits towards Unity, stability, and amenities, but they cost energy credits and minerals. This can be strong if you find tomb worlds and relic worlds. Otherwise, it's not that great. Just a bit hit or miss. Next one, OTA updates. Waives all Unity costs for resettlement. Your empire size from pops is down and edict fund goes up as well. This is a decent to good one. Not having to spend Unity on resettling is nice. The reduced empire size from pop can be amazing because usually that's why you get over empire size. The downside, of course, is you're going over empire size anyway if you want to build an empire that rules the galaxy. Overall, pretty good. Probably better ones, though. This next one is a very unique playstyle. Basically, you don't use minerals to produce alloys. You now use food. I actually like this one more than I thought I would when I played with it because minerals are used to assemble robotic pops. Mineral gains can be slightly difficult, especially early on for machine pops. This turns it into food, which you're not going to use a ton of as robots. In fact, you can't usually even build them except to sell to other species. Actually does pretty well with the rogue servitors because you're going to be building food anyway. This just decreases the mineral costs to your empire and forces you a little bit more into food, which is fine. Late game, you're going to have excess food. You might have shortages of minerals. This solves some of that problem. Overall, I think it's pretty good myself. Rapid Replicator. This is amazing on robots. It basically, you assemble your pops 20% faster. It's the real downside of robots early on, that you just don't have a ton of them. I'd take this on almost every machine empire if I could. The next one, Rock Breakers. I said minerals and machines sometimes have problems. This solves it. You get an additional mineral from miners. You will have an excess of minerals. This is not one I usually take as a starting trait. I tend to take this as like the additional trait you get later on if I'm finding I'm lacking in minerals. Overall, +1 minerals is really good because it's not like plus output. It's just a flat +1, which then is multiplied by the other gains that you can get from tech and stuff. Static research analysis. More research alternatives and code breaking. It's not good. Research alternatives is not amazing anyway because you want to research most everything you can get your hands on regardless. Code breaking is decent in multiplayer, not so great elsewhere. Unitary cohesion, gain on unity. You stick this on a rogue servitor empire and you're going to race through the unity and tradition trees faster than you thought you would. The downside of racing through those trees, though, is that sometimes you take traditions and stuff where you don't necessarily have like tech and stuff to get ascension perks. Some ascension perks are locked behind having tech. you might end up getting excess ascension perks until you find the tech later on. It's okay. It's good. Don't get me wrong. I never felt the need to have an excess of them on robots. There's buildings you build that get you unity anyway. Warbots, admirals in general, start at level 3. Armies do more damage. Army upkeep is cheaper. It's terrible. Outside of the admiral one, armies and generals are almost useless to some degree. If you're besieging a planet and you need a strong army to take it, why not just bombard it with your navy more so it gets weaker and a weak army can take it? It's not game changing. I wouldn't take it all, below average. And zero waste protocols, robot upkeep reduced by 10%. It's a decent one. The cost of robots, which is your whole empire, cheaper by 10 is good. There's just probably better ones to pick. And that is machine empires. Okay, on to Hive Minds. So there are several Hive Minds. Well, there's really one massive Hive Mind change that matters here. So the big one here is a devouring swarm. Basically, you're a hive mind out to eat the entire galaxy. This is the strongest of the xenophobe, kill everything empires in the game. You gain amazing bonuses for regen of your ships. You get more of them. You build fast. Ships are cheaper to build. You research biology fast. You're already a hive mind, which means you're going to grow quite quickly. This just makes it even nuttier. The downside is everyone in the galaxy is going to be trying to kill you. But if you're going to try and wipe out the galaxy, this is probably the best one to take. The robot one that we just covered earlier, Driven Exterminators, is weaker than this. And then the normal organics are even weaker. Very powerful, very fun, very hard though. If you pick this in like multiplayer, everybody's going to know you're going to try and conquer stuff. And they're going to gang up on you. If you're fighting AIs, you'll usually rampage through the first 2 or 3 AI empires, and then everybody will start coming against you. So be aware, very powerful. You have to keep expanding and fighting, or you're going to get outclassed, though. And there is one I should mention down here, Idyllic Bloom. If for some reason you're a fungoid or plantoid species, it's the only time your species change seems to matter in the game. You can do Gaia Seeders, which will eventually, at huge costs, turn all your planets into Gaia worlds. It's not that great, in my opinion, so I wouldn't take it. So let's go down from the top. Top 1, plus habitability, reduce popped amenity usage. It's good. It's not game-breaking. Hive minds tend to have large habitability anyway, and they're going to take over a lot of worlds, so having more worlds to take over is nice, but you're going to have plenty to take over usually anyway. The amenities usage, on the other hand, can be quite useful mid to late game. I don't even want to try and say this drones, but I'm going to give it a shot. Cordyoseptic drones. Basically, you can reanimate killed space animals, which is kind of cool. If you do take them over, they attack and move faster. And if you find any leviathans, which are, in the galaxy, you can sometimes resurrect them. Can be very powerful if you resurrect them. If you don't find them, though, it's not that great. So risk reward, the downside is the risk reward occurs late in the game. So you might not have a chance to solve the problem. But if you do, it's very powerful. Overall, I wouldn't take it just because it's random. But if you do get the right roll, you do great. Next one, divided attention. Empire size from planets, it's not good. Planets is usually not the problem with empire size. It's usually population. Elevated contemplations. This is the similar one to robots. If you want to ascend your planets, which means you're playing smaller, but you're playing taller almost, it's cool. It allows you to get through your traditions trees faster than you would expect. Overall, decent, but not amazing. Empath. This one's actually really good. If you are trying to play a at least decently friendly hive mind, this gives you more envoys, more diplomatic weight. You start to play much similar to a normal organic empire. My question is, if you're taking this, why aren't you just playing a normal organic empire for diplomacy? Because they're better with diplomacy than this is. On the other hand, The increased envoys allow for more spying, better relations, more control. Still very powerful. Memorialist, very similar to the one we covered, Machine Worlds, relies on you finding Tomb Worlds or Relic Worlds and putting Sanctuaries of Repose on them. If you find them, great. If you don't have any, it's not a good trait. Unfortunately, you don't really know that till you load into the galaxy. Natural neural network, unemployed drones produce research and you gain more research alternatives. This kind of depends. If for some reason you're having unemployment, it's good. But the reality is, if you're having unemployment, you're probably either super late game or you're not playing right. So I would not take this. I'd say below average. It's not bad, but you shouldn't be running into the situation this corrects anyhow. One mind, all leaders get less negative traits and you gain more unity. It's honestly an improvement on the robotic version. The negative trait removal is kind of cool. The unity gain is nice, but neither of them are completely game-changing unless you're wanting to race through tradition trees. Organic reprocessing, similar to what we covered with the machines. Use food to produce alloys. I honestly would probably take this on them if you're focusing into food and growth, just because you might have excess food. It's probably one of the easier resources in the game to max out. It saves you some minerals. The downside is the conversion ratio is not necessarily the world's greatest. Permutation pools, similar to the robots, faster biological pop growth, or assembly speed in this case, but you lose habitability per industrial district. It's good, it's bad, it's got its upsides and its downsides. The downside is that the habitability of the world goes down, meaning the cost to maintain population there goes up. I probably wouldn't take it myself just because I don't want to deal with the downside, which is arguably worse than what the robots have. Pooled knowledge, leader cap, leader gain, encryption. Always good thing to have higher leaders with more XP gain. Probably pretty good to take on most empires. Strength of legions. This is your army boost one, similar to the robots. It's not good. The Admiral at level 3 is nice, but not worth wasting a civic slot. Subspace, Ephasat, Ephafis. I have no idea how to say that word. Naval capacity, sublight speed. It's pretty good. If you're a warmonger hive mind, it's pretty decent. Increased naval capacity is always good. And the sublight speed comes in handy as well. Subsumed will. This is similar to what the robots had. Cheaper resettlement, lower empire size, and increased edicts fund. It's good. It's probably one of the better ones for hive minds, which in my opinion have slightly weaker civics than other possible empires. And anyway, that's the hive minds. So now we turn off the Gestalt consciousness and we get into the larger ethics. So this is the map of what your empire's beliefs are. And they're opposed. So spiritualists oppose materialists, xenophobe, xenophile, pacifist, militarist, authoritarian, egalitarian. Cool. You get to pick what you like. As you go out, there's a basic level of each trait, xenophobe here, and then there's a advanced version, fanatic. Fanatic gives more benefits, but tends to have more restrictions. Overall, if you can do a fanatic one, you're usually better. The downside is it costs more points. You have ethic points to spend, and they vary. The inner circle here, outside of Gestalt, is costs 1. Fanatics cost 2. So if you pick a fanatic, you can only pick one other ethic. If you only go level 1, you can pick up to 3 ethics. And which ones you pick change what you can take for an authority. If you pick authoritarian here, you have to be a dictatorial or an imperial. That's just the way it goes for fanatics. If you pick a level 1, you can play everything except for a democracy. Obviously, the 2 gestalts are locked all the time. And if you go egalitarian, you can't be a dictatorship or an imperial empire. You have to be oligarchic, democratic, or corporate. And if you go fanatic, you have to go democratic. That's how it goes. that's the only row that will massively restrict what authority you play. So let's start with the unique one here, corporates. So corporates change all your civics again. So we'll cover them and then we'll go with the normal ones. So you can do stuff like anglers. This stacks very well with the ocean origin. You get pearl divers. This used to be stronger. They nerfed it a bit. It does add an aquatic trait to, let's pick it first. It does add a trait to your species, which does limit the other traits you can pick. On the other hand, it's a decent trait. On the downside is you basically have to live on ocean worlds or you receive penalties. If you're going to find a lot of ocean worlds, pretty cool. Otherwise, you're going to have some issues. I just realized I have to turn that off. Outside of that, it's fun. It's more of a role-playing thing. Anglers are really decent, though. The free gain of consumer goods is really nice because you don't have to spend minerals to produce consumer goods. Plus, you get uncapped agriculture districts on ocean worlds. If you pick this and then you pick the I'll talk about that later. Next one, brand loyalty. You gain edicts funds and monthly unity. It's decent. Corporates play very differently. I'll cover them briefly afterwards. If you want to gain more traditions, it's good. It's really great late game if you're going to try and use unity. Unity policies. That's what I meant to say. Unity policies. Catalytic recyclers. This is where you turn food into alloys. Stacks pretty well with anglers because you get uncapped agriculture districts. Be aware, of course, the changeover rate is not the world's greatest. It's still really good, though. Combining these two together will give you tons of food and a decent amount of alloy without having to build the world's greatest amount of minerals and industrial districts type stuff. It's quite cool. You'll still have to build the industrial districts, but you won't be using minerals as much on them. Next one, corporate hedonism. This gives you the decadent lifestyle, meaning that the pops, keep clicking on it. The pops under it have increased happiness, which is increased output. The downside is they require more consumer goods. If you have entertainers on your world, your populations grow faster. And if you have any servants, types of slavery type stuff, they produce additional amenities. Pretty good if you're going slavers. Otherwise, it's decent because you get the pop growth from entertainers. So if you build entertainers, you massively can expand. If you're not going to do either of those and you're not role-playing something, I wouldn't take it. The increased consumer goods upkeep is honestly just painful to deal with at times. The next one here, and this is one that's going to drastically affect how you play a mega corporation. Should have covered it first. Criminal heritage. You can't trade with anybody. You don't have positive branch offices. Instead, you infiltrate people and set up criminal franchises. Think like the mafia or something. It hurts the people you build corporate buildings on. Basically, their worlds fall into crime and problems. It weakens them, so theoretically, then you could invade them. The downside is, right now at least, AIs are pretty decent at handling crime, or they just declare war on you, which closes your branch offices. It's great if you're stronger than those empires, because then you conquer them, or they don't dare attack you, and they just grow weaker over time. You get benefits from building on their worlds anyway. The downside is you have relationship problems with people. And people keep closing your branch offices, so you keep investing money, and sometimes they keep closing them. It's fun. It's more of role-playing right now than actually great to play. You get also increased infiltrating and code breaking. This is one where you'd want to be more into espionage than anything else. The downside is espionage doesn't tend to win you games currently. Franchising. This is cool if you have subjects. Your subjects get additional loyalty. If you have multiple subjects, there's no penalty, which can be a problem. You kind of need this or the similar default civic if you're going to use subjects and have multiple of them. It's not something you'll need to take as your starting civic, though. I would take this when you get the Society of Tech that allows you to add an additional civic. If you're using subjects, you should know around that time anyhow. So don't take early on. Later on, it's cool. Also gives you an additional holding in your subjects, and branch offices cost you less empire size, which is nice. They don't tend to affect your empire size too much overall. Don't pick this at the beginning. Pick this mid to late game once you get subjects. Otherwise, it's not worth it. Free traders, trade value goes up, branch office value goes up. This is all about how mega corporations play. It's very good, gives you plenty more money and stuff that you will want. I pick this unless I'm role playing something specifically special to Megacorps. The next one, Mastercrafts. Artisans replaced with artificers. They produce more consumer goods and trade value. Kind of cool. And every industrial habitat, industrial district gives you a building slot, except on habitats. It's cool. I honestly wouldn't take it though. If you're having consumer goods problems, there's ways to deal with it rather than taking a specific civic to address it. And the additional building slot, you're going to max out your planets usually anyway with building slots, so this is not game changing. I would rate it low. Some people might rate it higher. Depends on the play style. Media conglomerate, reduced war exhaustion and increased citizen pop happiness. It's quite cool. Basically, it allows you to stay at war more and your population's happier. The population happiness is probably the big benefit here. The more happy a pop is, the less trouble they cause, the more productive they are. It's good. I think there's probably still better ones for you to take above. Mutagenic spas. This is similar to what we saw on both Hive Minds and Machines. More growth at the cost of habitability and happiness. Since it's even worse than the ones I didn't love earlier, I probably wouldn't take this unless I'm role-playing something. The reduced happiness and habitability can be very painful. On the other hand, you can always replace it later. Once you've already built the industrial districts and grown your population. So if you're willing to do that, it can be good. Otherwise, I wouldn't take it. Permanent employment, you become necromancers. You become Necromancer Incorporated. Basically, you turn consumer goods and food or minerals into monthly organic pop assembly, which is different than growth. So you now have two sources of growing populations. They have the zombie trait, which basically means they can only do menial labor. You get an additional holding in your subjects, and sometimes you can resurrect dead space leviathans. Similar to some of the other ones you can pick, pretty cool if you want to resurrect giant dead space aliens and have two sources of population growth early on. Private prospectors, you get an additional different type of colony ship. It has different costs. Usually you can get more of them out there. You also gain reduced empire size from systems. Empire size from systems is usually not the world's greatest problem until you're close to conquering the galaxy. I wouldn't particularly take it for that benefit. The private colony ship is more why you would take it. It's good, not the world's best. Public relations specialist, great if you're going to engage in diplomacy. All told, I think this is one of the better civics you could take for a corporate one. Since you can only expand so much without receiving massive penalties as a corporate empire, being friends with more people helps, plus then you can trade more with them. Overall, really good. It's hard to get envoys, and diplomatic weight is great as well. It's almost like taking the whole diplomatic tree. Ruthless competition, leader cap up, leader gain up, and code breaking. Always a good one to take. I think there's better ones, but it's definitely above average. Scavengers, if you research the debris of destroyed other fleets of your enemies, you can gain research and resource cost, and you can sometimes salvage ships. It's decent. It relies on you fighting a lot or finding a lot of destroyed fleets to gain the benefit from. If you're not going to fight a lot, don't take it. If you are fighting a lot, there's probably better ones for you to take. I'm going to be honest. Next one, trading posts, increase starbase capacity. Don't take it. There's other ways to gain starbase capacity. Starbases don't usually win you games. Now we get into some of the more special ones. These require specific ethics picked on the left to unlock. Ascensionists, you have to be spiritualists. This is exactly the same as the Hive Mind in the machines. You get bigger benefit from playing tall and small and ascending your planets. It's actually really good on corporates because you don't expand as much as other empires. So playing tall is a bigger benefit. Definitely above average. Probably the one type of government and ethics I would take on outside of a role playing. Corporate death cult. You have to be spiritualist. Basically, over time, you basically kill a member of your population or several members. Every several years, you gain benefits, society, research, unity, and amenities using death priests. And then when you kill the people, you gain a similar benefit as well. And you get sacrifice edicts, which can give you immense bonuses. The downside is you kill off your population periodically. Plus, unless you're really role-playing something, you just kind of come across as evil. I'm sorry. There's no way around that one. Can be fun, can be powerful. It does limit severely some of your origins and other civics, so just keep an eye on that. You can't do it with Necrophage, for example. Otherwise, it'd be totally broken. Gospel of the Masses. Additional trade value. If you have spiritualist pops on other people's planets, you can build a unique corporate building, and your populace is more likely to be spiritualists. Currently, attraction is weird in the game. It's not a huge benefit. The big thing is the Temple of Prosperity. If you can somehow convert other people's planets towards spiritualist, which is super hard to do because of how ethics attraction doesn't really work great right now, you could theoretically destabilize them and turn them more to spiritualists. I've tried it a couple times. I never really managed to convert enough to either weaken the empire or make them like me more. Overall, not that great. Should be, but they really need to rework ethics attraction. Once they do, it'll be good. Indentured assets. If you've got slaves, this is similar to the other slaving options. Slaves give you more resources. Unfortunately, you enslave more pops. Powerful if you're using slaves. Otherwise, honestly, why are you taking this? Naval contractors. This gives you more mercenary enclaves and naval capacity. This is actually better than you would expect on a Megacorp because Megacorps don't have the world's most systems. As I said, they don't expand much compared to other empires. The additional mercenaries allow you to have more fleets that you can call upon to defend and fight. It solves some of their problems. Plus, those mercenary enclaves will pay you resources and ships and tech periodically. Overall, really actually good on these guys. Private military companies. This is an army boosting stuff. It also gives you mercenary enclave. Don't take it. Armies don't win you games usually. And then relentless industrialists. You can build coordinated fulfillment centers, which gives you alloy and consumer goods, but over time will turn your populations into two worlds. You know what? Actually, I'm not sure, but you might be able to theoretically stack it with the Tomb World origin, but I don't think you can. If you could, it would be rather broken. Overall, you're sacrificing a planet to gain benefits in the short run. Theoretically, you could shift to using habitats and ring worlds and stuff later, but losing planets, it's really not worth it, in my opinion. Unless you're conquering and expanding rapidly, you're going to run out of planets eventually. I wouldn't take it. Anyway, that is corporates. On to normal empires. Okay, normal empires. So we are going to just pick oligarchic for now because they have access to almost everything. Really, I said I was going to talk about corporates. So corporate empires, if you don't know how to do them, there's probably tutorials out there. But basically, your whole thing is to gain corporate commercial packs with other empires, and then if you click on their worlds, you can build a branch office, which allows you to build unique buildings, and they tend to give you tons of energy credits. You can gain other benefits like alloys, research and stuff, or naval capacity from them. Overall, it can be very powerful, but it does rely on having other empires in the galaxy like you, which is why having envoys is very useful. It's very fun to play. It's definitely a role-playing thing. You will have excessive resources, so you'll be buying a lot of stuff through the market because you have a large penalty, 25%, for if you start to exceed empire size. You'll still exceed empire size, but if you expand at the normal rate of a normal empire, you will have a 25% larger penalty. It can cripple you if you're not careful. You do get additional unity. So let's quick run through these empires, and then we'll stick with oligarchic and go over civics. So if you're a democracy, you have a vote every 10 years where you elect a new ruler. You can kind of meddle with it at times. Your empire has an automatic resettlement chance. Basically, your population can move freely around your empire. It's kind of cool, but it does, if you take a democracy, you should probably take a fanatic egalitarian because of the specialist pop output is really powerful. Actually, you know what? Before we do anything else, I think I'll cover the ethics here. Just because now it's starting to really affect it, whereas the corporate one, you can it affects it, but less. So if you look at it, fanatic militarist, you're going to be fighting. This is a huge boost to your ships. Almost any empire can use at least level 1 in militarist for the fire rate. It's equivalent to a tradition. It's quite nice. The only people who don't want to take it really are pacifists. Without it, in like multiplayer, your ships will be considerably weaker, so you almost have to take this. Over here, you've got xenophobes. This is if you don't like other populations, you're going to have one species in your empire or lots of slaves. And that's kind of it. It does give you benefits to the growth of your pop, and it's easier for you to expand. The downside is other people dislike you. And if you're fanatic xenophobes, you can actually kill or enslave all other empires in your lands. You can't let people come in, and your main race has to do all the hard lifting. Next one, egalitarian. As you expand further towards fanatic, you gain more unity from your factions, which can be great, but it does mean you have to appease your factions, or else you don't get the full benefit, and your specialist pop gives you more output. This is very powerful. Specialists are like getting alloys, getting consumer goods, getting research, all of which is great. Very powerful, very productive in advanced resources. The opposite here, authoritarian gets basic resources better. So you're trading specialists or basics. Over here, we get materialists. Materialists are all into robots. They get cheaper robot upkeep, which is great if you're using robots. But also the big benefit is 10% research speed. It's equivalent to finishing the discovery tree. Tech is king. These guys tend to be the tech leaders if you take it. I'm not saying you'd have to take this tech to be the tech leader, but it certainly helps. Just be aware that the expectation is you're going to use robotic workers, which can have downsides like robot rebellions later. Now you get pacifists. Pacifists are decent. The downside of pacifism is you're lacking in the military bonuses, and you can't expand offensively. You can really only defend, which means you have to expand either with subjects or have other people give you territory or have them destroyed in a crisis so you can expand. It does limit how large and powerful your empire gets. On the other hand, your empire will be more stable. Your pops affect empire size, so you tend to grow. You play tall, basically, where you have smaller. Actually, you can have quite a large amount of worlds, but you can't expand past them. So you want to expand rapidly, but then those worlds are more productive, more stable. And your empire size is lower, meaning you get more traditions and less tech penalties as you go. Overall, it's a great buff. The downside is really that you can't expand and you don't gain military bonuses. It's good, but it has its downsides. The next one, Xenophile. This is all about people who want to be diplomatic. If you're going to be trying to become emperor through being custodian of the galaxy and then taking over, you probably want to take Xenophile, if not fanatic ones. Goes very well with the democratic ones for relationships with other species. You bring the species in, they do the jobs they're best at. People will like you. You can trade with more people. It's quite useful to play. Honestly, there's almost no downside to it unless you're role-playing or for some reason you happen to roll a galaxy where everyone is fanatically xenophobe, which I've done before, and they're all basically driven exterminators. That was a weird game. There was like 2 let's destroy everything empires. I won, but it was a pain. The next one, authoritarian. This is all about slaves. Tyranny, you rule with an iron fist. The cool thing here is you gain more unity, meaning it's easier for you to expand early on and even mid-game. Your stratified economy standards are kind of interesting. Basically, it gives your rulers and specialists pop more happiness and more political power, whereas your lowers, workers, and slaves cost less to maintain. They have less political power. Your empire there is stable. The downside is eventually you can have unrest if you don't manage your worlds right. But your workers, slaves, and just non-slave workers give you more resources. They tend to give you the basic resources, whereas the flip side, egalitarian, gives you specialists. Quite cool. You can gain some insane food, minerals, and energy credits outputs. The downside is your empire is less stable than if you were a democracy. Up top, spiritualists here. It's the last one. This gives you more unity. Edicts are cheaper and easier to build and maintain. Temple buildings can generate some insane unity early on. These are the unity people. You will blaze through tech tradition trees faster than anyone else. The downside here is you're losing out on any research speed, so you might fall slightly behind in tech, which you can overcome with more tech buildings. Overall, spiritualist is very powerful. Might be one of the stronger civics, along with just even the base level of militarist. Gives good benefits for even level 1. The edict cost is nice as well, but the unity gain is really powerful. Anyway, those are the ethics. Let's go to a normal empire and we'll cover things. So, first one, aristocratic elite. This turns politicians into nobles. You can only build 1 noble estate per planet, but it does provide plus, I think it's 5 stability, could be 10. Basically, it makes the whole planet more stable, more productive. It's always good to build. This is one, and you also get a holding on your subjects that it's not that great though. Governors have a higher level cap, which is nice. The big use for noble estates are if you're a slaving empire. Sometimes when you colonize a new world, you'll have lower stability because until the world gets built up, you won't have as many rulers or specialist pops. Building a noble chateau or noble estate, will give you more stability, keep the world more stable, allow it to grow more, so then it becomes more stable as you put higher level jobs on it. That's what I found the best use for it. I'm not entirely sure it's that great though, because you lose a building slot to gain some stability, but on the other hand, stability gains are hard to come across. Pick which one you like. I tend to take it if I can. It's very fun for role playing. But I wouldn't take it. You have to take it if you're oligarchic or imperial. You can't take it, interestingly, if you're dictatorial, because you basically have to have nobility. You can't be egalitarian with it. Otherwise, it'd be too strong. Next one, Byzantine bureaucracy. Stability and unity from bureaucrats. Bureaucrats suck. Don't take this one. They used to be better when they impacted empire size. Since they changed it and they don't, it's not as good. Catalytic processing, same as all the other ones. You turn food into alloys. It's up to you. You're going to be producing food as an organic population anyway. The downside is, of course, you're using up food to produce alloys, whereas otherwise you use minerals. I haven't worked out the exact numbers, which one's better. It's kind of more fun for role-playing, I think. Kind of cool. If you're picking a origin or a trait that gives you more food, sure, take it. Otherwise, you might have some food problems. Also relies on the fact that some of your worlds may not have the world's greatest amount of farms. On the other hand, they might have not a lot of mineral districts either. Corvée system waves all unity for resettlement, and you gain more pop from integration. You can't be egalitarian though, so it's more for slave stuff. Free resettlement of slaves to manage your empire, great. Does require more micro control, but you get more pop growth from migration, so your colonies will grow faster. Kind of cool. I'd use it if you're using slaves, otherwise probably not worth it. Cutthroat politics, edicts upkeep, lower. Code breaking, it's not a good one. Code breaking is not game changing. Edict upkeep, while nice if you stacked it with Fanatic Spiritualist, you're still running across the problem that you have a limited amount of edicts that you can afford without going over the cap. It's still good, but there's better ones. Diplomatic Corps, 2 envoys and diplomatic weight, always good if you're playing politics. Organics tend to be the biggest politics players. Take it if you want to become Emperor of the Galaxy or Custodian, or you just want to run the Council. Otherwise, might not be worth taking, but envoys are never bad. You can always find a use for them. Efficient bureaucracy. Bureaucrats and priests provide ethics fund scaling with your unity production. This is much better than the bureaucratic one up here. If you're going spiritualist, this is very powerful. You'll have way more edicts and they'll be cheaper. Theoretically, you could stack it with cutthroat politics and have dirt cheap ethics. Edicts, and a lot of them. The downside is there's only so many edicts you can get that are worth taking. Plus, you're giving up on other stuff. Still good. I wouldn't say the world's greatest game changer, though. Environmentalists. This is kind of an interesting one. You can build ranger lodges, which add ranger jobs and produce unity for every naturally occurring blocker. And you gain society research and amenities from them. Pop consumer good upkeep is down. This has been improved a lot from where it was, and it's actually really good now. It used to just be consumer goods upkeep at a lower rate. Now it's higher. The downside is you can't remove all the blockers on your planet, so some of your worlds will not be fully used. On the other hand, you do gain a benefit for not doing so. There's actually an achievement associated with this on Steam. It's kind of cool. They reduce consumer goods upkeep is quite nice in my opinion. A little bit more role-playing, considering you're giving up stuff, does change your gameplay, but overall is kind of cool. Next one, functional architecture. Decrease building and district costs and more building slots. It's good. It will allow you to grow and expand faster early game. Overall, though, I think there's better ones, but you can have fun with it regardless. It's good. You're not going to feel bad if you took it. Masterful Crafters, similar to the Megacorp. More consumer goods, trade value, building slots from industrial logistics. Honestly, though, if you're running across consumer goods problems, you have other issues. It's not really worth taking a Civic to solve them. Memorialist, Sanctuary Repose on Tomb and Relic worlds, relies on you having Tomb and Relic worlds to build this on. It's kind of cool. You gain more unity and stability type stuff as well. It provides the Death Chronicler's role, which is nice. Stability gains are cool. You do have to find Sanctuary, be able to build Sanctuaries of Repose, though, to get the full benefit. Merchant guilds, capital buildings provide merchant jobs. It's more money, but honestly, don't take this. There's better ones. It's not terrible, but it's not good either. Actually, it's slightly terrible. Meritocracy, specialist pop output, leader level cap up. Leader level cap is good. Specialist output is great. If you took this and combined it with, obviously you have to be democratic or oligarchic. If you combined it with the egalitarian, fanatic, and materialist, you could theoretically have some pretty crazy gain towards your specialist outputs. And I think I just confused myself here. I must have had an ethics selected. Mining guilds, minerals for miners. If you're struggling with minerals at any point of the game, it's worth taking. I only tend to run across that problem either really early game or really late game when I'm converting everything to alloy. You don't need this if you're going to do turning food into alloys. But it's a nice benefit. A +1 minerals is handy. You'll have excess minerals. Mutagenic spas. So, okay, I guess we didn't cover this. It's similar to all the other ones. You lose habitability and happiness. If you want to grow quick, take it, but you have downsides that you'll have to deal with. I don't particularly love it. Pleasure seekers. This is the decadent lifestyle all over again. You take it if you're using slaves and stuff. Otherwise, I wouldn't take it because you won't gain the full benefit from it. But the increased happiness will give you more output, consumer goods reduction. or sorry, consumer goods upkeep goes up, but you get servants that use amenities and stuff. So you have to deal with more consumer goods, but your population is more productive. At least your rulers are. Police state stability is always good. This is actually a pretty solid one. You gain unity from enforcers and telepaths. If you're going psionic, pretty decent to take. The unity from enforcers is not game changing, but you're usually going to have a couple enforcers on every world. So it's a general output boost and a unity output boost as well. Okay, reanimators. Well, you get to be necromancers. You basically recruit undead armies, which aren't affected by morale, which is great if you're fighting an empire that uses morale reduction, like psionics or some of the Krasis Fallen Empires. You turn consumer goods into research points, which is nice, and naval capacity, and you spawn undead armies. And if you destroy enemy armies invading your land, sometimes they become undead armies to help you, and sometimes you can resurrect Leviathans. Overall, it's good. I think it's a general replacement for the military academy, unless you've specialized into building a strong army. This gives you a decent army without having to waste a lot of effort on building or taking traits or traditions that give you a strong army. Overall, it's good. It's a little bit of a role playing. It's kind of cool. Also, it does lock you off from synthetic ascension. Basically, you can't turn your population to robots because you're resurrecting them as undead zombies. Scavengers, similar to the other ones, you gain research and resource costs from destroyed fleets. Relies on you either destroying fleets or finding destroyed fleets. Sometimes you get ships. I wouldn't take it. I think it's particularly bad. It's kind of cool. You either have to be at war a lot or you have to be sneaky and constantly finding battles to research. Agrarian Ideal is a very unique one. Basically, you have to be pacifist. You gain benefits from doing more farming, mining, and generating energy, but not from building industrial centers, which this solves the problem of having to build industrial centers to a large degree. Your farmers produce amenities. Can be very good if you're taking like catalytic processing where you turn food into alloys, because this requires you or wants you to build plenty of farms. It's more of a role-playing thing. It's cool. The downside is you have to be pacifist, which honestly is a bit of a downside in a game about warfare. We already covered that. Ascensionists, I think we already talked about it. It's the same as all the others. Tall empires that are spiritualists gain benefits. Everyone else doesn't. Barbaric Despoilers. This is a very interesting one. Basically, the whole idea is you run around raiding planets and abducting their populace to gain them on your lands, which does allow you to grow your population quicker. It does involve you going to war multiple times. You have to go to war to attack them. It doesn't give you any benefits to fighting, which is the downside. Overall, I wouldn't take it unless you're role-playing. It's quite bad otherwise. It's kind of cool, though. If you can pull it off, you can abduct some really good population. The downside is you have to go to war to get the benefit of this, and you don't have any benefits to fighting, really, outside of being militarist. Speaking of liberty, unity, empire size from pops, you have to be egalitarian and democratic. If you do, you gain a ton of unity, and your empire size stays low, so you expand, you get tech, you get everything better. It's definitely worth taking if you're being democratic. Otherwise, you can't take it. Citizen service. If you're militarist, you gain increased naval capacity. You get a recruitment office holding, and you get unity from soldiers. If you're going to fight a lot and be militarist, but you're not like crazy xenophobe, this is worth taking. Probably pretty good for a multiplayer game if you're thinking there's going to be a lot of warfare. Next one, the Death Cult. I think we already covered this one, so I'm not going to cover it again. Distinguished Admiralty. This one is actually worth taking. This is standard. Well, it's slightly different than the machines, corporate, or Hive Minds get. Your empires and admirals in general start at level 3. The big benefit here is you get a ship fire rate increase, as well as an admiral level cap and a fleet command limit. It does not buff your army, which was the weakness of the others. It's all about your ships. It's good. If you're militarist and you're going to fight, take it. You'll have, if you even take level 1, you'll have plus 20 ship fire rate, which is huge. Exalted Priesthood, if you're going to be spiritualist, this will give you high priests, which generate more unity and other stuff. It's worth taking if you're being spiritualist. You have to be oligarchic or dictatorial, though. You can't be imperial. It's cool. You're going to get more unity. You're going to have some stability benefits. You lose some of the politicians, but politicians aren't amazing. It's good. I wouldn't say it's game-changing. A little bit more towards role-playing, I'd say, than anything else. But you're not going to go terribly wrong with taking it. And here we have the Fanatic Purifiers. These guys want to wipe out all life, similar to all the other ones. It's the weakest of the constantly at war, want to kill everything ones. It gets less benefit than either the machines or the Hive Minds. It's kind of cool, though. You have to kill all the population that you come across. It's powerful, but be aware that you'll have early game advantages, but as the game goes on, people are likely to team up against you. It's a feast or famine. Multiplayer, everybody's going to go against you. Strong, though, but it does drastically change the gameplay. Feudal Society, this is the one that gives control of subjects. They get more loyalty, don't suffer multiple penalties for having subjects. It does decrease the cost of your leader's unity upkeep, but you can't dismiss them, meaning you're stuck with them if they get negative traits or other benefits. Your employed governors give you unity. Overall, it's an improvement on all the other subject interaction ones, but I wouldn't start with this. Only take this mid-game when you get the additional civic slot or you gain additional subjects. Outside of that, it's not worth it. Also, your leaders are cheaper. Basically, you have nobility. Free Haven, you have to be a xenophile. You gain more immigration and immigration pull. People are likely to migrate to your planets. Your population will grow quickly on colonies. Overall, it's really good if you're being xenophile. Or honestly, it kind of feels like you should be egalitarian as well. Idealistic Foundation, great on egalitarians, plus 10 citizen pop happiness. You're not going to have slaves everywhere. Everybody will be more happy. You'll have less unrest. You'll have more productivity. It's all good. Very solid one to take. Seems like it doesn't give crazy bonuses because it's a single line of text, but it is strong. Idyllic Bloom. This is the similar one that we saw under Hive Minds. Over time, at a cost of a ton of energy, you can terraform all your planets into Gaia worlds. And you can also change other planet type stuff. It's kind of cool. You can do it on your vassals as well, which is neat. But it does, the criteria is specific. It has to be on your starting worlds ideal to your species, which has a limitation on the habitability. I believe it's 70 or above, but then you can make it Gaia worlds. As you gain more tech, you can do it to more worlds. Imperial cults, you have to be imperial, you have to be spiritualist, you have to be authoritarian, but you get a ton of edicts. Basically, it guarantees you another edict for the whole game. If you throw it on tech or something like that, you'll gain a huge benefit from it. Honestly, though, I think there's probably better ones to take. But if you're role-playing, it's kind of cool to use. Inwards Perfection. This is people who want to play like... it comes out of China. Basically, you want to be isolationist, run on your own, no one interfere with you. You gain huge growth, bonuses, tons of unity, population's happier. You have trouble trading with people. People have trouble spying on you, but you can't really spy on other people. The downside is, if you read at the bottom, this civic cannot be manually added or removed. You'd have to have almost somebody invade you to force change of your government to get rid of it. It's not worth taking unless you're committed to it for the whole game, because you can't get rid of it. You have to survive on your own. It's very powerful. What a lot of people used to do is they used to take it and combine it with Agrarian Ideal, because the bonuses somewhat stack. You're very powerful, but you're totally isolationist. But unlike all the other xenophobic population, you're not out to kill them. You just want to be nice and peaceful. You have to be xenophobe and pacifist. You can't expand really, but you expand early on faster than anyone else. Kind of interesting. Honestly, though, I wouldn't take it unless you're going for role-playing, just because it makes interacting with everyone else hard. It's very difficult to do stuff with them. On the other hand, you're a lot stronger, but it doesn't give you any military bonuses, which is the downside. You have to instead get that by just being a larger, happier, and more productive empire. Meritocracy, leader cap, specialist pop gain. I think I already covered this. Great for egalitarian and materialist empires. Nationalist zeal, war exhaustion gain down, claim influence cost down. If you're being militarist but not xenophobe, it's probably type worth taking. You'll be able to fight more wars, claim more planets easier. It's good if you're wanting to be a warmonger, take it. Otherwise, I wouldn't. I think there's better warmongering ones, though, to take. Parliamentary system, you have to be democratic. You get factions, you get more unity from factions. You already get a ton of unity from factions. Basically, if you can manage your factions, you will have more unity than you know what to do with. Especially if you combined it with something like spiritualists. You'll have massive amounts of unity. This is the build parliamentary, spiritualist, egalitarian if you want to be using late game unity edicts like crazy, because you will have and you will get to them a lot sooner than you would expect. Overall, good if you're going for unity, but probably you don't want to double down into unity that hard. Philosopher King, rulers, governors less likely to get negative traits, dictatorial imperial authority, ruler level cap up 2. This is very good if you've got a long-lived species. Otherwise, I wouldn't take it. The reduced negative traits is cool. The ruler leader cap is nice, but through tech, you'll gain enough leader caps that unless you've got longer-lived species, either through edicts or traits, they will die before getting the full benefit of this. Pompous purist, this is for xenophobes that actually want to engage in democracy, but they have negative opinion problems. Basically, you get more envoys, and you can only engage in diplomacy if you propose it yourself. It's a bit more role-playing than anything else. People still won't like you, which kind of ruins the point of doing diplomacy. If you're going to go this way, why be xenophobe? Go something else, in my opinion. You can do some weird doubling up stuff. It does have its benefits, but it's more role-playing or highly specialized empires get the benefit from this. Relentless Industrialist, we already saw this. Over time, your planets turn into tomb worlds. You could use this with Sanctuaries of Repose civics to gain benefits from them. Well, actually, you can't because it forbids memorialists. But if you've got like tomb world habitability, you can kind of get some benefit out of it. Overall, though, I wouldn't take it. Losing planets hurts, no matter how you lose them. Shadow Council, if you're having elections, you can control your elections. Your ruler pops give more output, which is kind of good, but you only have so many ruler populations, and you code break better. If you want to be a shadow ruler behind the throne, it's good. Otherwise, I wouldn't take it. Shared burdens, if you want to be communist in space, you need this. Basically, shared burden, all pops have the same consumer goods. Other empires, the rulers use more, workers use less. You can't be slavery with this. You're basically locked into one type of living. You do have an additional stability. Your pops move up and down. If you take harmony, which stacks heavily with this, your population doesn't care the job they work. They'll move up and down. They'll go from rulers to workers with no complaints. You gain additional holding, which isn't that great in your subjects. That's about it. It's cool. It's a role-playing one. Otherwise, I wouldn't take it. Slavers Guilds. If you're using slaves, you want this all the time. It gives you more slave outputs. Very good. Only you're going to use it if you're authoritarian. Technocracy. You get science directors. You have a higher chance you get specialist tech. You get more research alternatives. It's great if you're going for a tech build. You have to be materialistic. If you do, it's worth taking, though. The output to tech bonuses can be crazy. Warrior culture is the last one. If you're militarist, you change entertainers into duelists. You use alloys to produce unity, amenities, and naval capacity. Early on, naval capacity can be slightly tricky to get, even towards late game. This helps a lot. The using alloys, though, hurts, though, because you're using it rather than building ships with it. You have to produce more allies. On the other hand, once you do produce more allies, you don't really have to worry as much about amenities. Boosts your army, which is pointless, and you get an additional mercenary enclave. It's okay. I think there are still better ones to take for militarists. The fires, the better admirals. Those are the ones you're going to want to take over this. Okay, on to the traits. We are not going to do overclocked traits, just fair warning. That's such a small subset of them. We're not going to cover that. Anyhow, traits. What do we got? Well, traits work. You have 2 trait points and you have trait picks. You can have up to 5 traits and you have 2 points to buy them. You obviously cannot buy very good ones, like extremely adaptable, without taking negative traits, which gives you additional trait points. So we're going to cover which negative ones are good to take, which ones to avoid, and which good traits are worth taking. Good traits are worth taking, but let's quickly cover the unique ones. So down here, you have to be plantoid fungoid, but it does stack with clone bots or spawning droids. Basically, you get organic pop assembly and you produce population faster than other organics. Very powerful if you're doubling up into pop growth. Hive Minds in particular get a big benefit from this. Radiotropic, food upkeep goes down, energy upkeep goes up. If you live on tomb worlds, so if you picked something like Calamitous, or not, whichever the one is where you live on tomb worlds, it removes some of your energy upkeep. You also grow faster on tomb worlds and have habitability. Very powerful if you're willing to stack it, but then you're required to live on tomb worlds for a while. Kind of cool. The energy cost can be a little bit painful if you're not ready for it. It requires a different style of play. Phototropic, it's basically the same exact thing. The only difference is that you can live on tomb worlds. I'm pretty sure it's from 2 different DLCs, and that's why it's the same. I think it's going to change. Aquatic, this is the one I already showed you. It requires an ocean world start. You basically have penalties if you don't live on ocean worlds, habitability, and housing usage. But if you do live on ocean worlds or flooded habitats, you gain habitability, housing usage reduction, and you output more basic resources. Very powerful if you're going to live on ocean worlds. Otherwise, first off, you won't be taking it, but I would avoid it if you're likely to colonize non-ocean worlds. Of course, you can just have another population colonize those worlds too. But it's something to avoid if you're being authoritarian, where you have to have your ruler pop on all your worlds. Better for egalitarians than authoritarians. Noxious here. This is if you're wanting for some reason to play with the toxic stuff. You have better minimum habitability on all worlds. 30 does not improve the worlds that much. It still requires your population to be somewhat tolerant of the planet to live on it. On the other hand, you don't have anything above 70% habitability, meaning more consumer goods, outputs, unrest, stability issues. Honestly, just for that alone, I'd avoid this. You can get around it, but it's a little bit painful. You also have more housing usage. Non-noxious pops have more issues with them. On the other hand, more noxious pops, basically you like suffering. So if you you lower the happiness of the non-noxious populations, your noxious populations are happier. Can be used a bit with slaves and stuff to gain some benefit for your ruling class. Otherwise, it's just a pain to play around. When I tried it, I didn't even play along with the game. It was just annoying. So let's get to the actual other stuff. We'll cover these 2 at the bottom, and then we'll start from the top. Inorganic breath. Pops require more upkeep, but they produce exotic gases. Can be good. Exotic gases are used for high-level science stuff. The downside is the upkeep really hurts, especially early game. I would actually avoid this one entirely. If you're going to take this, gene mod it in later. Incubators. This is a unique one. Your population grows faster if there's less pop on a planet, meaning your colonies get up to speed faster, but they take longer to become late game productive. So your early game is faster, your late game is worse. Technically, you can gene mod this. You can just gene mod this out later. which is what I would do if I took this trait. Overall, though, interesting one, does affect the way you play. So let's start from the top, because now we're back to the base game stuff. Agrarian, you get more food from jobs. Unless you're doing something where food is converted into alloys, stay away from this one. Food should not be a problem for a well-run empire. It doesn't even sell well on the market. Ingenious, energy credits from jobs. This is a very good one to take because energy credits can be used and turned into anything else. Plus, if you don't have energy credits, your empire kind of collapses anyway. It's a nice one to take. The 2 cost is a little bit painful, but it can be overcome with a negative trait. Industrials, minerals from jobs. If you're having mineral trouble, honestly, it's still probably not worth taking. Minerals should not be your problem. If they are, yes, you can take it, but there's better traits. Intelligent is probably one of the best ones. 10% research in all categories. It's amazing. If you're doing a tech build, you definitely want this. Thrifty here, trade value from jobs. It's not worth taking really unless you're a Megacorp where you're going to have lots of trade points. Trade is okay, but it's not something you easily control, and some of the jobs that produce trade aren't really that good. Natural engineers, physicists, and sociologists are all the same. For 1 point, you get 15% research in a category. The cool thing you can do is you can take intelligent and then take one of these natural ones, which is 10% combined with that, so that's 25%. You can do some really cool combos with that. If you take these two, these are adaptable, 20% and 10% of habitability. The extremely adaptable is nice. Honestly, for the additional 2 costs, though, for a 10%, probably not worth it. Better to gene mod it in later. But it does allow you to expand to more worlds early game. It's kind of up to you. If there's a lot of habitable worlds, as in you've changed the makeup of your galaxy, might be more useful. Overall, though, I'd probably avoid it. You're guaranteed usually 2 minimal habitable worlds, and plus you can tend to find other species to colonize any other planets within your borders. Non-adaptive, negative 10 habitability, don't take. Just don't take. It will make even your high habitability worlds worse. The less habitability you have, the more painful it is to run your pops on those worlds. Definitely a hard no for a negative trait. Rapid breeders, pop grows faster. Pop growth can be one of those limiting factors, as in you can build tons of buildings, but you don't necessarily have the pop to live in them. This is good. The downside is later on you tend to have unemployed pop. It's up to you. Overall, it's really good if you're doing something competitive like multiplayer and you want to get your empire as large as fast as you can. Can be a bit of a struggle for new players. On the other hand, slow breeders is the opposite. It's again a no. You don't want to take this. You'll have trouble having enough pop to run your empire. Pop is very powerful. You can use it. You can and need it in all your buildings. Without it, you have reduced output. Just don't take. Talented leader cap. If you're going for a leader cap build, you could take it. There are better traits to take though, and you gain a decent amount of leader cap from tech and tradition trees already. You gain 4 from traditions if you build for it. Tech gets you, I think, another 2 or 3. The odds are if you take this, you're probably going to max out your leader level earlier than you would like. Quick learners, leader XP gain up. It's more worth it than talented in the sense that eventually as an organic pop, your leaders will die. This will get the new ones up to speed faster. Slow learners is the opposite. Leader gain is down. Technically, if you had a long living pop, you could take this, but the downside means your pops are less productive when they do die and are replaced, so I wouldn't take this either. Traditional, increased unity from jobs is good. There are other ways of gaining unity, but if you're doing a unity build, this can be very useful. Quarrelsome is the opposite, negative unity. I wouldn't take this just because you do want unity gain to unlock traditions and ascensions. Docile, empire size from pops down. Empire size from pops is usually your biggest empire size problem. This will not solve it. There are better traits to take, like tech ones for positive. Unruly, the opposite, empire size from pops. it's just going to make what's already going to be an issue for you, empire size from pops, worse. So I would avoid it as well. Strong, army damage up, which is army damage is ignore armies except to take worlds, and even then you just build more armies. Worker pop output increased. Strong is half of it. It's okay if you've got slaves. If you've got like the servile origin, by all means stick it on your servile pops, because it will give you more output from them as slaves. Otherwise, it's not really worth taking. Single point is okay, but there are better ones to put on. Weak, on the other hand, reduced army damage and reduced output. If you need a single trait point, can be decent to take because army damage doesn't really massively matter. On the other hand, the lack of worker output can hurt your early game. Nomadic, pop from immigration up. Colonies grow faster. Resettling is cheaper. There are ways to overcome resettlement costs. Unity-wise, they're not huge costs to resettle pops. The opposite is sedentary, lower growth from pops, more expensive to resettle. This is kind of one of those ones I take as a dump point. It gives you a point. The downside is not as crippling as some of the others. Overall, it's a great way to gain a tech point. I recommend taking the negative one here. Communal, reduce pop housing usage. Usually not the world's greatest problem till late game. It's easier to in fact take solitary and get another trait point bonus. So now you can get up to 4 with those two. It might hurt you at times, but you can always gene mod it out later because it's not super expensive. So I'll leave those on there. Charismatic, amenities from jobs. If you're having amenity issues, sure, but the reality is amenity usually can be overcome just by building like an entertainment forum or something. 1 per planet usually is enough. So I wouldn't take it. Repugnant, on the other hand, reduced amenities from jobs. You could take it if you're willing to build another like entertainment building, because 2 buildings will handle almost any size world. The downside is this will cause trouble for you early on and in colonies where you don't have a lot of amenities. So I would avoid it if you can, but can be kind of interesting to role play with it. Conformists, governing ethics attraction up. Governing ethics attraction is, they still haven't fixed it. They really need to rework how often pops change governing ethics. If they do, this will become way more useful. For now, though, honestly, having deviance where your governing ethics are negative doesn't hurt you. It's another way to gain another point if you're willing to accept slightly less stability. Venerable is extraordinarily powerful. It's amazingly expensive, though. Your leaders live 80 years longer. Basically, you'll go through 2, maybe 3 leaders in your empire an entire game, maybe 4, depending on how things work out. It's great for that. If you're going to do this, you're going to probably want to do it with something like necrophages, who benefit the most from this, or high leader cap stuff where the leaders gain have high levels so that they get a benefit of those higher levels for longer. Fleeting, on the other hand, is the opposite. Population dies more. If you take this, you almost want the leader gain positive trait, in which case you're just wasting 2 points. I would avoid it just because the penalties towards your leaders get painful. High leaders are valuable. Decadent, slave and worker happiness. If you have slaves or workers, they don't have a lot of political power, meaning their happiness doesn't really matter. So it's a great dump point to waste and gain an additional positive point for slavers. Otherwise, avoid it because it's painful. Resilient, defense army damage up. Honestly, I wouldn't take this at all. Defense armies very rarely stop invasions because they can just get bombarded. Technically, you could do a build where you're like underground and you take reduced bombardment damage to make your world's total garrisons, but that's such a strange build. Outside of a multiplayer or role-playing, I wouldn't take this at all. Conservationists, reduce consumer goods upkeep. This is a lot better than it might appear. Late game, consumer goods are massive. 10% reduction will allow you to save resources to use on other buildings. Wasteful, the opposite, consumer goods upkeep up. if you take this, you're going to have consumer goods problems early to mid game for sure. So I would avoid it. And that is all the organic traits. Now let's jump, and I'm going to do machines. Because hives, if we look at it, the traits are exactly the same because they're still organic. The big difference is for machines. So let's wander over to machines. So for machines, first off, you have machines, which are always happy. Always can live on any planet, meaning you can colonize anywhere. It's a huge benefit for robots. Now, a lot of this is the same, so I'm not going to cover it again. We'll only start when I find... Oh wait, sorry. Did I not pick my machine empire? Sorry. I did. Okay. It should be different then. That might be a bug. Normally there's other stuff. Maybe I have to pick a machine here. Here we go. Yeah, that's what I had to do. Change the appearance to the machine. I guess you just have to do that. That's okay. Just do that and you're here. So you'll note that you only have one positive trait point. This is the downside of robots. You have less you can modify your species with. You have to take more negative ones. So let's start from the top. Power drills, more minerals from jobs. This is better on machines than it is on organics because you require minerals to build your population. Overall, it's a great choice. You might not want to start with it though, but if you do start with it, you'll be able to expand and build your population more efficiently. Superconductive, energy credits from jobs. Robots require energy and minerals to build and upkeep. It's worth having. Efficient processors, just general resources from jobs. Why wouldn't you take this? The reason is, at the beginning of the game, it requires you to take 2 negatives just to get. Mid to late game, definitely worth modifying your species to have. It's a huge boost. Logic engines is the same as research for organic. It's very good. It's very powerful on machines. It's worth taking if you can get to it. Double jointed, reduced pop housing usage, don't worry about it. I wouldn't take it. Opposite, pop housing usage. Honestly, you could do this as a dump stat for your robots because usually you can just build another building to solve housing usage. But you might have some housing usage early on. Housing usage issues early on. Enhanced memory, leader cap. This is actually very good on robots because their leaders don't die unless they malfunction, meaning higher level leaders you'll have for longer. One leader could last an entire game. Why not max out their levels sooner rather than later? Very useful if you're going for a leader cap build. It's great. Emotion emulators, amenities from jobs. Not the biggest issue for robots in my opinion. Same thing with uncanny. Honestly, you could use uncanny, but then you're going to have amenity issues. So I would avoid both of those. Unless for some reason you find yourself having tons of amenity problems, but that's more of a build issue than it is a species issue. Durable, upkeep reduction. Honestly, not the biggest issue towards mid or late game when you have more pop. Probably ignorable at the beginning. Honestly, you could almost start with high maintenance, except for the fact that high maintenance will make your start significantly rougher. But if you're needing a pop mid to late game, you could theoretically stick this in as a negative trait to gain a benefit. Learning algorithm, leader experience game, not as good on robots because your population leaders tend to live forever unless they go crazy. So I would avoid this one. The opposite, leader experience gain, you don't want a negative just because it'll take longer for your leaders to hit their caps, which you want. Mass produced is great on robots. You assemble your population faster, which is amazing. The downside of robots is how slow their population grows. This solves it. It's always worth taking. 100% of the time, more assembly speed is worth it. Custom made's the opposite. Don't take it. You want a large population. Recycled, cheaper to assemble. Okay, it's good, but I'd much rather actually have my population cost more. Take mass produce so they build faster, and then take another point elsewhere. Luxurious is probably my dump stat for robots early on. Streamline protocols, empire size from pops down. Not the biggest issue for robots, considering your population grows slower. So honestly, high bandwidth might be worth taking. If you took Luxurious and high bandwidth, you will have 5 points to spend. So you could do efficient processors and logic engines, which would give you huge bonuses. Or you don't get efficient processors and you do something like memory and something else mass produced. That would be a pretty strong robot build. Okay, we have a couple other minor things to cover here. So let's hit those and then that will be it. So one of the first things we have to cover is necrophages. So first off, let me get off machines here. We'll go back to humans. So the big thing here. Oh, sorry. This takes a moment here to get out of all this stuff. There we go. Necrophages have huge bonuses. They live for 80 years. So combining this with enduring gives you 160 years on average for your leaders, which is crazy. The downside is your base pop doesn't grow. You instead have to convert them from your other species. However, once they're converted, they have lower food, minerals, and energy upkeeps. They don't work well as workers, but they are better as your rulers or specialists. Hive-minded, don't worry about that stuff. Overall, it's a very powerful one. If you combine it with quick learners and enduring, I think you can still take enduring with this. Yep. If you combine it with those, you'll have a long-lived, highly skilled population, which is very powerful. And you'll have a pre-patient species, which is your species before they get converted into necrophages. They have a trait called serviles. They're happier. They produce more resources. They can't have leaders. And they can't be rulers or specialists. They're basically laborers, and they do it better than your average laborer. Similar to one of the other origins, which gives you serviles. It's basically the same. It's the same trait, just slightly different origin. So that's one of them. The clone army provides a clone soldier trait. Your leaders live 40 years less, meaning you're going to have a lot of leaders die, meaning the XP game might be worth taking on them. Governing ethics is forgettable. Army damage, also forgettable to some degree. On the other hand, you can't genetically modify this, but as the game progresses, you will have different ways to affect it, including changing it. And you also have additional traits and bonuses your leaders can gain and lose. It can be quite powerful to use properly. You don't gain anything else really to help you, except that you cannot have slow breeders. So anyway, that's that one. I don't believe there's any other ones here that particularly, other than overtuned. You know what? Let's just go over overtuned since we're here. So you've got all these different traits. Less leader lifespan is standard. Habitability can be combined with adaptive here to have an immense amount of habitability. Plus 30, you can basically colonize every planet, but your rulers will be dying. Very powerful if you stack it. The death hurts, though. Any leader death hurts, to be honest. Juice power, honestly, ignore this. The army damage is relatively pointless. The worker pop output is okay, but not at the cost of 10 liter lifespan. Farm appendages, more food. Honestly, you could just take agrarian for an additional 1 cost and gain the same benefit without losing your leaders. Same thing for miner. I wouldn't take any of these 3, farm, miner, or technical. Just it's not worth losing your leaders more often. They're already shorter lived just from being just from picking any of the other ones. Amenities from jobs, a little bit more worth it, but overall amenities should not be a huge problem for a well-run empire. Low maintenance, reduced consumer goods upkeep, better late game than it is earlier game, but overall is a decent trait to pick. Augmented intelligence, on the other hand, is great. Better research is amazing. Combining this with some other traits, you can gain insane research. The downside is your scientists die more often than you would like, but you can adapt later on. This one, XP gain at the cost. I'm just going to stop saying the leader lifespan cost because it costs all of them. XP gain is decent. Honestly, though, with the death of the leaders, this becomes more important so that they can get back up to speed when they die. Or then the replacement will get up to speed when their precursor dies. Definitely worth taking. The downside is you lose more leaders, but when you lose them, they get more productive. I'm not sure what the cost benefit really is there. You could try it out, figure it out yourself. Traditions, more unity. Honestly, at the cost of leaders, it's not worth it. Elevated synapses. This is a very powerful one, but be aware your leader lifespan drops to 30. Can be very powerful. You can combine it with augmented intelligence and the other ones to have like plus 40 or 50 research, but your leaders are going to die constantly. So it's kind of up to you. Your scientists will suck. On the other hand, you'll still be researching text quickly. Probably worth doing if you're going to double down on it, but otherwise I wouldn't do it. Right here, pop growth speed up by 30, pop housing usage. Great one to take early game to explode your population onto the map. The downside is you are limited in clone vats at the beginning of the game, so it is possible to grow faster than your origin can support easily. You can get around it, but for the average player, it's tricky. Excessive endurance, huge boost to habitability, more resources from jobs. You can do some crazy adaptability builds on these guys. Let's see, where's... Oh, it's up top. You can basically pick most of the adaptive traits. The downside is you then have to take 2 massively negative ones. And it can be tricky to find, as you can see, to find any that give you 2 negative traits outside of like unruly and slow breeders, which you don't want to take. Unruly you could handle, theoretically. So my best recommendation here is you don't take adaptive. And you instead just do plus 50 habitability on all worlds at the cost of unruly or 2 other negatives. You'll colonize everything. Your leaders will die a lot, but your empire will be larger and more productive earlier than anyone else's. If you're a good player, the overclock traits are amazing. If you're not, don't try playing them because you have to change your play style drastically. I believe that is all. Oh, wait, we've got lithoids to cover. Okay, lithoids. Lithoids are different again. Oh, wait, did I not? Oh, I have to change the appearance to a lithoid. Okay. So now we have the lithoid trait. So lithoids consume minerals rather than food. This is great in the sense that you can kind of forget about food to some degree. The downsides of the lithoids can hurt a bit, though. They're slower to grow, slower to assemble. They live longer. They can live on almost any planet. And their army has more health, which is kind of pointless, but is kind of nice, too. It's better than some of the other army boosts. If you're taking lithoids, you could double down into leader caps, long-lived leaders, if you want to. Or you could put into, I believe you can actually get... what am I looking for? I can't remember what I'm looking for, so never mind. You can take some of these stuff down here. Oh, apparently I left on those gene ones. You could do stuff like inorganic breath type stuff. You could have like weird lithoids that produce gas when they move. You also can do stuff like, here we go, crystallization. Can be worth it on them. You get more assembly on pops. This solves some of the pop growth problem. You also could do volatile motes per month. If you're going to pick it, though, you could also do crystals. I would do the exotic gases, mainly because tech is still powerful and you need gas for tech, whereas motes are warfare and skin is more entertainment amenities stuff offhand. Overall, is a very interesting change style of play. It stacks very well with the calamitous birth origin, because then you'll terraform your planets more towards minerals. If you're going to play lithoids, You have to change your entire style and mentality of play. The breakpoints of bonuses and gains are entirely different. If you're going to role play as them, it's worth doing. Otherwise, I might avoid Lithoids for a while until you're skilled at the game. But it's worth playing a game as Lithoids because they're just so different. It's fun. And I believe, I don't believe there's any actual changes here. Nope. Other than having some of these phototropic stuff, it's all the same. So hopefully I've covered everything. If I missed something, do leave it below in the comments. If this video helped you in any way, shape, or form, do leave a comment, leave your evaluation of every civic and ethic that I got wrong or I got right. And subscribe, leave a comment. Oh, I have a Discord you can talk about this stuff on. And thanks for watching. Bye for now.